Welcome to Dad the Influencer, a podcast about travel, technology, and innovation, broad enough to encompass history, art, religion, and politics in ways that will stimulate the neurodivergent and amaze the neurotypical. With interviews, dialogues, and the occasional monologue, we explore our humanity through travel, the technology that enables it, and the ecosystems that encourage elastic thinking and innovation. Today, we are welcoming Eric Bai, who spoke last week at Nottingham's Data Science and AI Meetup, which happens generally on the first Thursday of each month. We're on meetup.com if you're interested in visiting, and if you have something interesting to speak about, please get in touch with me. Hello and welcome, Eric. Good. Thank you so much for your talk last week. It was very engaging. It got a good reception with lots of questions, which is always a good sign. Our very first question, unrelated to your talk, is how did you end up going from where you were born to where you live now?
Short version, met a girl. Longer version, had always wanted to move out of Canada and live in some different places. I moved to Berlin for a little bit, moved to Toronto from where I grew up on the West Coast, and then we met, and I came out here to see how it went and never left.
Fantastic. So what the listeners might not know is that both Eric Bai and myself have both come from the West Coast of Canada, came to the UK, met a girl, and never left. So what'd you know? First real question, for people who didn't see the meetup talk last month or last week, what problems are you trying to solve?
Yeah, so for people who didn't see the talk kind of call it high agency AI. The problem that I come across in a lot of different organizations, I guess I'm an AI consultant, so I work with businesses on adopting and getting value from AI. The biggest problem I see with a lot of businesses, and whether it's AI or not, is people being able to just get around the processes they have to just get things done. Since AI is such a huge enabler in what it allows you to do, and the speed of change is happening so quickly, high agency, as in the ability and willingness to just take action, is becoming more and more important. But there's a lot of traditional business cultures out there that like to take 6, 12, 18 months to make a decision, and that's not something that's going to work for the long term with how fast things are moving.
And when you talk about high agency, you mean the person using the AI has the agency to make things happen, and the AI itself has the agency to actually put and implement real solutions to real problems.
Exactly. I think the example I gave in the talk was a friend of mine created a beautiful AI roadmap for their business. They were struggling to even get the time for people to have meetings about the items on that roadmap. When I looked at it, realized actually that you could do every single thing on this roadmap. So why don't you just do it? And that's what it comes down to a lot of the time. The reflex is often write a document about it, have a meeting about it, have another meeting about it, schedule it for some point in the future, then maybe someone will get around to doing it. But with AI being such a great enabler, but this applies to many situations outside of AI, a lot of the time it's faster to sit down and do it, show someone the results, and that's much more engaging and tangible than trying to convince someone to give up their valuable time to try something they don't understand.
So, people, okay, so the general public say that they really like AI, or, well, companies think that the general public like AI. No one actually wants to use the AI, and then when people do use the AI, they complain about it. So, companies are saying, candidates, don't use AI to, do your CV because it's the same as everyone else. Don't use AI to, essentially, quotation marks, cheat on technical tests. Companies are now, because they're so worried that candidates are cheating on technical tests, are now putting in extra measures to try and stop the candidates cheating on technical tests. But that's actually going a bit too far, because it's going to the point where they have to have people assess the technical tests and where their eyes are going and if they look away from the screen, which I think is invasive.
it's a nightmare for recruiters. I think all interviews essentially can't be remote anymore. Technical tests have to be, if you want someone to do a technical test and you don't want them to use AI during it, then the only feasible way to make sure they're not using AI is put them on a machine of your own and watch them. Essentially, the big FANG companies, they've shifted all technical recruitment to in person over the last 12 months. And recruiters are just going to have to adapt to that. But it is a challenge. I think you have people automatically blocking AI written CVs and cover letters, and it's that you don't necessarily want people not using AI at all for those roles. But if it's obvious and it's bad, then at least you know that they're not using AI effectively.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I imagine there was a point where people said, look, if you can't be bothered to handwrite your CV or your cover letter. In fact, I'm sure I was told that at some point in my life. If you're going to write a cover letter, sorry, now I sound really old. Thanks, boomer dad. But yeah, if you're going to write a cover letter, handwrite it to show that you're taking the time. And it's a bit what's the point?
With my penmanship, I'm really happy I never had to deal with that.
The problem that you're trying to address, if you're going to frame it as a problem, the problem that you're trying to address is how you get companies to accept the solutions with AI. Is that correct?
There's a few different problems to address. So from the talk perspective, the problem I was trying to address is that people often don't realize that just having agency is an option. They're so used to putting together a proposal, putting it in front of someone, and then kind of getting beat down to the point they just stop coming up with ideas. So the problem I was trying to address in the room was to the individuals to say, look, you can just do things now. It's my favorite Sam Altman quote. So just do it and kind of break out of that bad habit of waiting for everything. The problems I'm trying to address with companies, though, are very similar. How do we shift from kind of everything being a 12-month project to validating whether or not this can solve a problem in a day or an hour? And how do we make that tangible? And how do we build that culture of just experimenting and doing things within the business? Because for a lot of businesses, when they're trying to roll out this tool after so much control over so many years, how do you then tell people, actually, we want you to experiment and play and see what works and see what doesn't, but also do so safely.
And this is the Jeff Bezos move fast and break things.
I think it was Zuckerberg. I think was move fast and break things.
Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg.
I kind of prefer the build, measure, learn feedback loop from Lean Startup. Move fast and break things has some negative connotations, especially with things like Claude and some kind of sketchy AI tools floating around. So there is some that, but build, measure, learn means like, all right, we don't have to do 6 months of work before we can get feedback from this. We can get it in front of real users, see what the results look like, and make a more informed decision, and continuously make more informed decisions moving forward.
Okay, so you can do things now, but you need to build, measure, and learn. You need to learn from what you're doing. You need to measure what the results and the impact are. You need to learn, and based on that learning, decide what you should do next. A slide that I removed from that talk was about taste and kind of taste for, as in like choosing what to experiment with and where to focus that experimentation time on. Just because it is something that deciding what matters and what should be tested and what should be done does require some intuition. What you should be moving towards. Yeah, and would you also argue with this that you're basically, this is something that's possible, and it's possible now if you don't have sort of Zuckerberg, Sam Altman levels of funding, that it's because you can do this cheaper and easier on AI, that this is now something that's possible for people that it may have been too expensive? Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, everything from like research, being able to run deep research queries, where a lot of the time this stuff just wasn't, AI enables something that wasn't economically feasible for, where you might not have spent
a week with researchers diving deep across a whole bunch of topics to solve a particular problem before a 30-minute call. And now you can spin up a few research agents and consolidate what they find and go into that call incredibly informed. Building prototypes has never been easier, and just caution people that just because you built a prototype that looks really good, you probably still need someone technical to look at it to make sure it's secure. But a prototype goes a long ways when it comes to putting it in front of people, seeing how they use it, proving that works. And moving to production is getting faster and faster, and I think we'll probably see that exponential curve go up like crazy this year. So if you have teams that can use these tools and move faster and understand how to get the most out of them, it's not just enabling and empowering today, but their capabilities are going to continue to go up on that exponential curve alongside the capabilities of the technology.
Okay, interesting. And the difference between a prototype and a real scalable secure systems, I think quite interesting as well. I saw actually quite a funny video about someone talking about how easy it is to do anything in a VPS, and then what's involved in actually securing a VPS. So, press the button, do the CPS, then you have to add the firewall, the certificates, the security, all the different layers on it. Same thing with scaling is, doing a prototype, doing something that's performant under heavy load is quite different. Do you think AI can just solve the first problem of how to quickly create a prototype? Or do you think with this high agency, you can also start saying, actually do this, create the prototype, but do it with the best security?
I think we're getting closer and closer. I think a lot of the time, the security is always going to be important, or usually going to be important, depending on what you're actually using the application to do. But a lot of the time, especially when I'm talking to more traditional cloud consultants, they're like, oh, we need to get this on AWS and get it scaling. Like, look, this is going to get max 200 users a day. Just make sure that the app is secure. There's nothing sensitive going into it, and make sure it's running efficiently. But a lot of the time people try and do enterprise level scaling and architecture, and suddenly you take something that built in a day for someone to go through the code and secure it and review that stuff. But not everything needs to scale, at least needs to scale like that. And when it does become commercially valuable enough to do that sort of scaling, you have, again, that learn loop in place where actually that business case is much, much easier. I do think in the next 12, 18 months, we'll probably get closer and closer to systems that can interact with AWS and get all the services you need spun up. If things continue on the current trajectory, I think we're going to be living in quite a different world on that front. But that's just my opinion. Controversial in some circles, in others, it might be a bit too cautious.
Okay, and now I know we've had in previous conversations, you've mentioned, I think in the talk as well, you mentioned that you work a lot in CRMs. I suppose that's probably one of the better examples of something that doesn't necessarily need to scale. And a lot of the CRMs that are out there are built for such an enterprise level that they can actually be overwhelming for smaller businesses, for medium-sized businesses. Is that where a lot of this came out of?
A little bit. Most of it's come out of more new technology solutions. I was actually talking to a client yesterday who's asking me, like, look, should we just vibe code our own CRM? We're paying £50,000 a year or something for Salesforce. And Salesforce is notorious for building a really complex product that's far too complicated for most of its small, medium-sized company users. That's quite expensive to maintain and keep up to date. But the trade-off there isn't just the cost, but it's the cost of maintaining that over time, keeping it secure over time, adding new features. And a huge part of it's just the opportunity cost. A lot of those small to medium-sized businesses, it would take them a long time and a lot of support to be able to create the specifications they need for their CRM. And so I think it's finding the right tools and understanding where it's actually going to give you that return on investment, and just being cautious about it, that you're not creating a lot of technical debt. The other element is, like, I mean, but sometimes it does make sense. Like for myself, I've created myself a little CRM / cash flow tracker / project management tracker. And part of that wasn't even cost. It was faster for me to build it like a CR, like a tool like that from scratch, than when it was for me to try and configure existing tools in the market to meet my needs.
Makes sense.
But
yeah.
I'm not going to get the full marketing automation stuff built in, and I think we're going to see a lot of those platforms get stronger and stronger. So a lot of uncertainty over what the next couple of years looks like. So it is difficult to make those decisions today.
So I guess, and this is one of the things I was thinking about is basically we've talked about where AI helps. Where is it less helpful than you initially expected it to be?
The biggest bottlenecks I'm running to at the moment is just where you have a lot of legacy systems in place. You procured some software a few years ago. Having it connect to a whole bunch of APIs wasn't super critical. Or you might have built something over the years, and where it's not as useful is when people are doing stuff in one system and then the next system and then the next system, and sometimes doing multiple steps within those systems. So while in theory that's a really easy task to automate or augment with AI, because you're swapping between different screens, by the time you're done copying and pasting, it's not necessarily adding value. So that seems to be where it's the biggest bottleneck and barrier right now. I believe once we get cost-efficient, more secure, reliable computer use tools that can just kind of operate some of those systems, we'll be living in a very different world. And we're already starting to see
or agent to
agent, as long as those agents can interact with those older systems. And we are starting to see hints of what's coming with tools like Claude Cowork and Codex, where it's kind of like that vibe coding style thing where you give it a product requirements document and it builds a whole platform, where in this case you give it like a standard operating procedure with connections to different platforms and rules and specifications for each step in the task. And it can go off and do much more. But the biggest blocker or bottleneck there is that most companies actually haven't defined all that stuff. And the bottleneck tends to be the time they have to sit down and get that prompt and the specifications correct, so they generalize to 95% of use cases.
Okay, interesting. And is there anything you've done that seemed to be going well with this sort of high agency AI, and it was like, yeah, this is all going to be good, but once it started being put in front of real people with real processes, it started to fall apart?
I mean, there's been lots of little experiments I've run where you just don't know if it's going to work until you do get it in front of someone. But with that kind of shipping fast, getting that feedback as fast as possible, it's been possible to get something quite mature in front of people, but without sacrificing weeks or months worth of work where it would have done previously. So I haven't had something get to the point where I've had to put myself or clients have had to put a lot of time and effort into it only for it to fail. You can generally find out really, really quickly, is this going to work, with some like testing some basic prompts in ChatGPT and then building a quick prototype in Replit. And you start to understand pretty quickly whether or not you're getting the reliability that you're going to need. And it's important as well to have those failures, because a lot of people focus so much on the things that they're 100% confident AI can do today, and then when the new models come out, they keep doing what they've always been doing. But actually, by experimenting and finding those failures, you're creating basically a list of test cases to say, oh, when the new model comes out or we get some better productization of this stuff, I've got a list of really valuable use cases and prompts and processes set up where I know I couldn't do it last time, but new model comes out, I'll copy and paste some stuff, and we'll be able to see whether or not we've sort of achieved that. So failure on that front is really important for kind of building that awareness of where it fits and where it doesn't today.
And so you have that loop,
Build, measure, learn.
What is it? Build, measure, learn. With the learning bit, is it the AI that's learning, or is it the people that are using the AI that's learning, or is it a bit of both?
I mean, the AI isn't learning itself, at least in most of the use cases. So it's usually the people learning, but then part of that iteration is updating the prompt or the data that it has access to. So the AI is not necessarily learning in that sense and updating its weights, But the AI is learning in the sense that the information that you give it or the instructions you give it adjust to make kind of increase the likelihood of a successful response.
Next question is, what is quietly working, do you think, that no one's talking about?
I think there's kind of two layers to this. I think vibe coding is quietly working, and you might think, well, it's not quietly, everyone's talking about it. But the reason I say quietly is that almost everything you're doing when you're building a tool is actually quite a long, complex process of writing multiple files and iterating over those and following rules and taking different actions and tool calls. So the reason I say quietly is I think a lot of people don't realize just how far beyond the current product that the capabilities are sitting at the moment. So we're starting to see hints of that with Claude Cowork, which is a tool built on top of and one of the AI labs called Anthropic, their Claude Code model, which was really developer specific. And now people are ChatGPT released a platform called Codex, which is built for coding, but they're starting to build in more knowledge work stuff. And I think people don't realize that it's not that the models can't do this stuff, it's that people haven't built the product around it yet. And so I say quietly because it's all there. You just have to be a little bit more technical to use it at the moment. And we're going to see a huge leaps forward in doing some really complex knowledge work. So kind of entering that vibe coding for knowledge work era, where we're going to be, again, it'll be like coding though as well. You'll people generating slop code and slop products. But for those people that take that time to really define their workflows and their processes and their requirements and everything else, once that workflow is built, they're going to unlock in incredible amounts of productivity. So that's what I'm most excited about at the moment, is what does that product look like? One of the first tests I did with ChatGPT 4 when it first came out was building out a product requirements document for what I call like an idea processor. So we all think about like the word processor, and I think where we're shifting to is more of like an idea processor or a work processor.
Cool.
And there's lots of really interesting challenges from a user interface perspective with how do you put all of that work in front of people? How do you extract all the information from their heads? How do people manage that many different tasks without burning out? Harvard Business Review put out an article yesterday saying like people using AI heavily at work are like really grinding themselves down and risking burnout because you get an agent running and you say, well, I'm not going to spend 2 minutes not doing more work, and you get another agent running. You had one of the co-founders of OpenAI post yesterday that's like, anytime I don't have an agent running, it feels like I'm wasting time. I made the mistake of not spinning one off before this call, and now I feel like I'm wasting time. So
now you're interesting, and I guess there's an old adage that labor-saving technology always raises standards rather than saves labor. Where the example, my favorite one is that basically soon as automated laundry machines started existing, washing machines basically, what happened was rather than people spending less time washing their clothes, it became necessary to wear new clothes every single day rather than every month. So it just sort of raised those standards. And similarly with IT or with programming, software engineering, what happened is there was a time where your ability to code was very mathematical, and it was based on being able to generally set XY accesses on screens. Then GUI interfaces came out, third generation programming languages came out. Suddenly it wasn't all maths of setting X, Y, and Z. It was all maths around managing memory, and but you could draw your little buttons and your drop down lists and all that. So what I'm wondering is vibe coding just going to become the fourth generation of programming, and you're still going to need people with an engineer mind? Like, is this something that, are we going to take this away from engineers, or is this just going to be engineers have to think more like founders, but they still need
I think
to
it's
be
hard
engineers?
to say, and whether we hit a wall. If things continue at the rate and in the way that they're going, and we don't hit a wall, then I think it'll be much more that engineer mindset to create your specifications and your requirements. But but with that product manager hat on and with a good understanding of the commercial side of the business. I think the engineers that sat kind of in a little box and kind of built the components without like a really solid like systems perspective of the commercial elements of what they're doing, or the comms side of what they're doing, are going to potentially struggle. And I agree though that the expectations of output and productivity are just going to go up like crazy. Where there will be a risk is the companies that decide that they don't need to adopt. But previous generations of digital transformation, like we've got Excel and cloud and the phone and everything else, your company could get by without that like kind of 10, 15, 25% efficiency gain. But if your competitors are suddenly, if you're like a AI development or you're a software development company and your competitors can suddenly ship 10x or 100x what you can do, suddenly it becomes cost prohibitive for anyone to hire you instead. And that's going to happen, I think, across various industries.
And there's the paradigm shift. Like, for example, when, Blockbusters actually had a good run of it once the paradigm shifted to streaming rather than videos, but they still died in the end. You either shift with the paradigm or you don't, and if you're not using AI, you're probably not going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's not just that efficiency speed, but when you build those knowledge and that knowledge and those skills in house, you start to realize what's becoming possible. The favorite projects that I work on is when someone says, "Look, can we automate this task?" And we look at automating it. Yeah, we can automate this. But actually, if we can automate it, then we can suddenly scale it to 100, 1,000, 10,000 times what you did before. And once we've scaled it to 10,000 times, we can do it in all these different adjacent areas and workflows that are quite similar. And now you've got, in some examples, like a really nice data set, and you can put an AI layer on top of it. And suddenly, actually, you're using more people, but you're delivering 10, 100, 1,000x revenue or value for customers. And I think that it's not just that expectation of how fast you can move, but what becomes possible. And that's, again, what's really exciting about the fact that the AI capabilities are so much further ahead than the products are, where it's not historically someone would build a SaaS product, you'd see it on the market for a few years, then you decide to go buy it because that's the trend. Now, in some industries, it's up to you and your company to build the product that's going to add the novel value and create something new.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So looping back to the high agency AI, in order to do and have high agency AI, what you actually need is high agency people who understand the high agency AI and are able to do it, which is often the exact opposite of what a lot, especially of bigger companies, do. Like I know there's long been a joke in tech circles that places like the big, they're not called FANG companies anymore. What are they called? The Magnificent Seven.
Mag 7
is the current term. But with all these companies is that basically you get a job with one of the big ones. They've hired the best and the brightest engineers, and then what they're trying to do is to stop them from doing anything that goes outside of the direction that they're already going in. And you see that all over the place. So I guess that's the question: is the paradigm shift going to be that what we need is a high agency people?
I think so. Within reason.
Yeah.
I was reading some really interesting analysis of like Google's 20% time, and that's like kind of like the epitome of like high agency. Like, go and do something. Like just go do something. And no, I believe I think Brin pulled it back so they could really focus, and that seems to be like the tipping point for Google suddenly stopping to do a lot of the interesting stuff. But they have shifted, I think, especially within the kind of the AI product side of things. And
so they're going
I don't
back
think they're
to
going back to it
think?
necessarily, but I think there's a lot more empowerment of those teams to just be able to ship. Like, realize, even Microsoft is realizing like, one of the reasons Copilot is a bit of a frustration sometimes is because they're shipping stuff that isn't necessarily perfect. And people have that expectation of things in Microsoft working really well all the time. But a lot of them are saying...
do they really?
Yeah. No.
That was me being
I
cynical.
think better than it does
You're right.
sometimes.
It does
where
do
like
that.
they're just they're enabling and they're empowering teams to create products and ship them. You do have to pull those into your long-term strategy and figure out how to avoid creating technical debt. But I think you need those high agency people that can go and run that experiment and see how it works and have a safe, productive pathway for them to play with this stuff and learn it. Because it's not just... The other thing is, like, without that agency, you don't end up learning nearly as much. And if you don't have the time to apply that agency, then you're just kind of doing everything within the box you've always been told. So you don't end up identifying those really unique, interesting, and helpful use cases.
Interesting. So yes, and actually that makes a lot of sense, because you get agency with trust, but that trust needs to be both earned to an extent, but it also needs to be built. It needs to be built into the system. So you need to be able to trust that the person that you're giving the agency is going to align with what your goals, values, what the shareholders' objectives are, everything else. So it's all about, part of that creating the high agency is about creating and getting the people who you trust and who you can trust aren't going to go off on a tangent that you or your investors don't want to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having a clear company strategy and vision and making sure that people understand what the goals are and what the problems they're trying to solve are really, really helps. There's a lot of traditional organizational management that, if you just have it in place, should naturally lead towards people being more aligned. But you do need...
Which is really difficult in big organizations because you have the comms at scale, and really difficult in small organizations because who's got the time to put up a mission statement when you're trying to run up as many AI agents as you possibly can.
I think there's a run forward, see what works, and then take a more mature approach. I think the challenge at the moment is that that kind of change traditionally took 18 months, 2 years to embed in the company. But now you've got to change it for what's possible today, and then in 2 weeks' time, we might get a new tool that comes out that changes your expectations and how that should operate. And then in another month, we might get another tool that comes out, and you've got to change again, whether those changes are more risk that's out there, or risk being mitigated that you don't need to worry about as much, or new capabilities or new products, new changes like shifts in the market. I think one of the things that I really like that I heard from one of the founders of MailChimp said it on a podcast ages ago, where tech companies are now expected to reinvent, like used to be expected to reinvent themselves every 2 years, which was a really high pace. And now they're expected to reinvent themselves every 6 months. But the time it takes to roll out that reinvention is more than 6 months. So you're rolling out the reinvention while working on the next reinvention. And we don't know what tech's going to be capable of in 6 months and what the best options are. There was another post I read this morning where if you'd gone 100% in on AI kind of early last year, you would have been building everything with ChatGPT 4.0 and LangChain. And now you're looking at that and ripping it all out and replacing it with more agents.
And I guess this is the issue, is that there's two bits when you're trying to figure out what the skills that you need. There's, on a micro level, there's what's the skill, as in, is it LangChain, is it ChatGPT, is it something else? But then there's also the skills, like what are the soft skills that you need? Do you need high agency? So right now we're saying, it looks like what you need is high agency people. Who knows? Maybe in 12 months from now, actually what you're going to need is people who are more high literacy, more high abstract, or maybe really technical people. It's hard. It's
for sure.
Really hard
I
to
think
tell.
One of the interesting things happening in the coding space now is people are almost looking at coding as like fast-paced strategy games like StarCraft or Factorio, and they're like, is is the skill that we're going to need. People that can just like watch all of these little things happening across the board and just keep everything moving forward and managing resources and tokens and everything else. Or we can get, and
yeah, basically a DevOps monitoring almost kind
yeah,
of
exactly.
skill set,
but
isn't it?
DevOps is a pretty unique skill set, and you don't have a lot of DevOps mindsets in knowledge work. Software development, more,
Yes.
I guess, naturally aligned with it. But when you get into knowledge work tasks and how much human supervision is needed at each level, and yeah, how do we build those feedback loops? How do those feedback loops? Does that learn feedback loop become completely automated, and it just adjusts itself type thing?
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess that comes down to as well that what skills individually I have kids in their 20s and actually hitting the 30s now, and a conversation that we have a lot is about what the skills are, what skills you need for the future. I've been sort of saying for the last 10 years, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but if it's nurturing, athletic or creative, you're probably going to be all right. If it's athletic, can include things like a lot of trades. Like I don't think bricklayers are at risk. In fact, if anything, it'd probably be one of the things that I would say, actually, you know what, that's probably really worth going into. But things like driving, things like accountancy, things like, as we just talked about, a lot of the traditional software engineering roles could disappear and disappear quite quickly. And it legitimately looks like they might be, even with companies wanting to do, test to make sure everyone's able to pass their technical exams without AI. It seems that actually being able to pass them with AI is quickly becoming a more useful skill. So my question for all of that for you is, what skills do you think are the skills of the future? Which are the ones, if you had to take a guess, that you would tell the 20-year-old to focus on?
I think being able to understand multiple aspects of the business is going to be really critical. So not just understanding the coding, but understanding the commercial, understanding the product, understanding why design matters. I think there are elements of the trades where I think there's going to be a ton of demand. I think there's a lot of FUD at the moment going on around that too, because a lot of those conversations, I can't even remember what the acronym means, to be honest. Basically a bit of BS floating around about that topic at the moment.
Okay.
Because what they're not taking into account is, you can't assume that wages are going to stay like they are if you get suddenly tens of thousands or millions of people trying to enter that trade. You got your supply and demand. If suddenly you get your supply
That's
goes
true.
way up, suddenly is that the most valuable place? At a higher level, what I think is going to be most important for like the coming decades is going to be curiosity. And if you have that natural curiosity, then as things shift, you get personal benefits. It feels good to work through those shifts. You can see the implications. You can make those connections for what's possible and be the person that can create that value regardless of your role. If you're lacking in that curiosity side, then everything becomes a bit scarier. Everything becomes a bit more opaque because you're kind of having to force yourself constantly to relearn because we don't have that scenario where in a lot of roles where things are going to stay the same. And like, I'm a naturally curious person, so I love change. I go mad if I don't have constant change. But there's a lot of people who've been doing the same thing for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And they've had the whether they were naturally curious to begin with and had it ground out of them, or they just don't have that natural curiosity. They just want to go in and get the job done. Without that curiosity, I think it makes that change a lot harder to deal with and add value during that process. But I think no, I mean, I would 100% agree with you. I wonder if it's confirmation bias, because I'm also definitely on my side.
very curious. But But yeah, the yeah, that's interesting actually, and I think you're right. Certainly in what we're doing and what I imagine the people listening to this podcast are doing, it is because
definitely. And I think
curious.
I guess the last thing I'd say is just like critical thinking, thinking, like learning how to think. I heard my business program described by someone else who attended it before I did years and years and years ago as you're learning about business, but actually what you're doing is learning how to think. But you had to actively engage with the program to get that skill out of it. There's other people that did it, memorized what they needed to do, and then never needed to use anything they learned because they memorized it, but they didn't understand it. But if you learn how to think, then you can do that context switching, and that ability to context switch is also really important.
Do you know what? I emphatically agree with you. And one of my big bears that I've mentioned a few times already in this podcast, and it is the hill that I'm willing to die on, is that there's so much focus at times on STEMs and education and how important it is for people to learn maths and sciences and technology. And it is 100%. I would not be where I am without it. But you do not get innovation without art. You do not get innovation without curiosity. It is an ecosystem, and it's an ecosystem.
100%. And
people.
That's what I really liked about the business program I did at UVic in Victoria, because actually for our prerequisites, we did 2 years. The first 2 years, you have a limit to the number of business courses you're allowed to take to use those credits towards your business program. So we weren't even allowed to doing like all sorts of like psychology and philosophy and lit and stuff like that. And it really did set me up. I think it set me up differently to approach problems in a more unique way than people that came out and be like, oh, I did 4 years of Excel and I'm a wizard at Excel. But they get a bit stuck with, I'm going to follow the HBR case study. And as soon as the context switches outside of that case study, they might struggle a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I worked with someone years ago, and I won't say any names to protect the innocent or guilty, but she had a PhD in mathematics from a very well-respected university. She was, I mean, man, was she smart. She could, I mean, I know smart's really a broad term and is a terrible one, but she really was. Like, you just talk to her, you're like, wow, she really got code. She could take a chunk of code. She could elegantly bring that down to a couple of very performant, memory balanced lines. I mean, it was absolute poetry what she could do. Problem is without having everything done out, it's like, and she used to come to me all the time, and I'm just like a bit like, blah, I don't know what I'm doing. But she'd come to me and she'd like, oh, what color should this background be? And I would say blue. And she would say, well, why is it blue? And I say, because it's supposed to be. And she'd be, okay, and that would be fine. I don't know. I mean, it's just like sometimes you have to make a decision, don't you? But there is that, there is that thing, and it's like the best programmer I know or software engineer I knew was also in some ways the worst because of her inability to be able to just say, I'm going to do this. Where I think everywhere, every business, every software engineering business I've worked with, there's always been that handful of people that are good because of, you might
almost say, some agency
skills.
to make that decision, to make it whatever color. No, you can change it at any point.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, is they have the curiosity and they have the critical thinking skills to be able to say, okay, this is somewhere where I can take a risk and say it's blue. And this is somewhere, and I can say it's blue because actually I say it's based on whatever, but actually that's part of the color palette, or the logo's blue, so why not make it blue? It's like making decisions that you at least think will be in line with what you think is
exactly. And I mean, one of the reasons that Anthropic and Claude has ended up in a really interesting place from like the Claude's personality is they actually have someone whose role is essentially the head of Claude's personality. And interestingly, she's got a PhD in moral philosophy. Amanda Askell, really interesting interviews. Would really recommend listening to a few of them. But really, really intentional and conscious with how they're designing the Constitution. And it really comes out in the model's ability not just to be aligned, but in the model's ability to decide when and how to make decisions effectively in that way. Where a lot of the other labs are very much a whole bunch of PhDs in math that if you have like a router and it decides whether it should think hard or not, they think almost all knowledge work doesn't deserve any thinking because it passes the tests. And like, there's a difference between a good nuanced email or an email that's worth £10,000 to me. And like understanding all that context, but in their head it's like, well, it wrote something and it passed the test, and therefore it shouldn't use that extra compute.
Yeah, which is interesting, and the fascinating thing about that is the cultural influence that can have. I mean, ChatGPT, I don't know if you ever noticed, I use ChatGPT as the one I use a lot. I don't know why. It's just the one that I use, because I use Claude a fair bit as well. But when I just put something in, and my complaint with ChatGPT has always been, and this is difficult to say in a politically sensitive way, but it's just too happy. Like, it patently has been created by people in North America, because everything is, oh, great, oh, fantastic question. It's like, yeah, do you know what? I've been 20 years in the UK. I don't need you
interestingly,
to tell me something's fantastic. I'll make my
Amanda's
decision.
Scottish, the head of personality at Claude. So maybe a bit of that comes out.
Is she? Oh, okay. So she's got a bit of British.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. But also, if you turn on that thinking mode, it completely changes the personality too. There are two separate models with different personalities, and I actually used to prefer having zero personality until I started working with Claude more, and I'm like, oh, actually, like a little bit of personality is all right. Like, I wanted that ice cold, like just give me the facts, but I really bounce back and forth, really dependent on the task I'm doing.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And one of the, tying this all back to the travel bit, is one of the things I love about working in travel technology is that you work from people all over the world, which means that you get used to communicating with different communication styles, ranging from very direct to very indirect ways of speaking. And I could see how in different, and you learn that there's contexts where actually using indirect communication forms are actually a lot more effective than being direct, and there's other that they're not. And I could see how when dealing with an artificial intelligence, it'd be exactly the same thing. Sometimes you need someone who understands that when I say that's fine, I don't actually mean that's fine at all. I mean, that's not fine.
I mean, we could have a whole conversation on this topic alone. I think there's huge concerns about AI creating like a monoculture based on the places it was trained. On the flip side, I'm Canadian living in the UK. I'm still figuring out elements of British culture I just can't wrap my head around. We're all like, I'll put a transcript in. I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, I'm a Canadian living in the UK. Like, what did my wife mean?
Yeah.
Or like what in this this
you
is a
say
negotiation.
You don't mind,
and I can't understand. Like I feel like I must be missing something. Like here's exactly what you're missing, and be like, oh, like I had never considered that before.
Yeah. No, it is. It's. I mean, it's interesting, and it ties back to the agency, because part of what makes something with agency be trustworthy is that it has the culture. And part of the difficulty in trying to build a corporate culture, especially if you're trying to build a diverse corporate culture, is how do you keep a corporate culture that is a corporate culture? It's like, this is our culture, but also foster diversity in that, so that you're not saying this is our corporate culture, but unless you're suit, tie, black car, Stonewall tires, whatever, you don't fit in. How do you allow the both to exist at the same time?
Yeah, it's I think it's gonna be fascinating to see how the next few years play out on that front. There's also some values differences and legal differences and stuff, and I can see certain politicians putting their thumb on the scale for, actually, I want the culture of this tool that has vast influence across billions of users to match my thoughts. And we're starting to see that a bit with Grok and Musk and his approach to that personality in many ways.
And you see it with Grok, and I've had to play with some of the really good Chinese AI models that came out when they first came out. I haven't played with them since, for no reason that I haven't got around to it. But and it's the same thing. Sometimes you can see where it leans towards political biases on both of them. But then actually, if you look at Claude and ChatGPT, they probably do as well. We just don't see it as much because they lean more towards the political biases.
Yeah, very, very much.
Rather than the ones we don't.
Middle of the road Western values, for sure.
Yeah. What my son's girlfriend derisively refers to as centrist dad, which he keeps accusing me of being when we have heated political discussions.
You just got to start using. You just got to start using AI more to crush her in those discussions.
Well, so weirdly, I have a son or a stepson actually, who was saying that he wants to put on his CV, "I will never use AI." And then I have another son and his girlfriend who are both, basically totally anti-using AI for anything. And then I've got a daughter, two daughters who
I can see why you're spending
for everything.
I can see why you're spending so much time thinking about bricklaying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it right there. But yeah, okay. Well, that has been very interesting. I think I've got now the last the last question, and so I'm actually looking at a list of last questions and decide. Well, actually, before that, I'll start off with where can people follow your work and learn more about you? This is your chance to do a pitch for yourself.
Yeah, so best place to find me is on LinkedIn. My name is Eric Bye, like BYE, bye. And I do most of my writing and posting there. I've got a newsletter there. Feel free to connect with me or my website, erictronai.com. And yeah, always happy to have a fun chat about AI. I think there's so much happening at the moment, and that's what I love most about what I do. I get to have super fun, interesting discussions like this all day, and really enjoying working with lots of different types of businesses from pretty much every industry, from tech startups up to kind of like 1,200 employees, my biggest client at the moment, across everything from training and implementation and prompt engineering to prototyping and innovation and invention and everything in between. So yeah, just encourage anyone listening to drop me a line or throw me a follow, and
okay,
I'm always happy to hop on a call and have a fun chat.
Cool. And depending on where you're seeing this podcast, I'll try and put a link on to that as well. But yeah, Eric Bye on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And that's Eric with a C, isn't it? Yeah. So then my final question is, what question should leaders, industry leaders, company leaders be asking but aren't?
I think they should be asking, do we have the skills and knowledge to make decisions about the future? I think a lot of them are trying to make a lot of decisions about the future, but they aren't necessarily informed or have that skill and knowledge internally. So they're trying their best to make really long-term strategic decisions about what they should be doing, or short-term decisions about how to get the most out of AI. But if they don't have those knowledge and skills in the room with them, those are going to be difficult decisions to make in an informed way. And that isn't just a pitch. I think they should all be developing these skills, but to do that, it requires using the tools and doing that experimentation and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that seems to be the biggest gap, is understand what you don't know.
Cool. Thank you very much. So there you have it. Eric Bye. He's available or contactable through LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you very much. And it's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Likewise. Thanks a lot, Ben. Really enjoyed that. And thanks for having me out to do the talk in Nottingham the other day.
You have been listening to Dad the Influencer. talking about travel technology and innovation. Please subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss new episodes. And if you'd like to talk about something on this podcast related to travel technology or innovation, please write me at dad@dadtheinfluencer.com or leave a comment wherever you're seeing this podcast.